I recognized early on that doing less was funny and also was less common. I've been given the opportunity to realize, oh, there's more. You don't have to do less.
Among television viewers, David Hyde Pierce stood out. After appearing in one of the most popular comedies of the 1990s and winning 4 Emmys, he mysteriously disappeared. No new Frasier series, feature film roles absent, a cameo at most. On the other hand, he remained. Finally, he decided. The truth is more complex than everyone anticipated, with covert returns to Broadway, quiet rejections, and even being succeeded by his own fictitious son. If that's the case, then why did he abandon Hollywood? What is he trying to conceal at this point? Now, let's find out. David Hyde Pierce seems to be in every place at one point. Nobody could have missed him. His voice, his features, and his careful, cutting motions. He was Kelsey C. Grammer's, the show's protagonist, frazzled younger brother, Dr. Niles Crane, for 11 years in a row. He left an indelible impression. He was exceptional. His neurotic hand motions, his manner with a wine glass, and his delivery of a caustic one-liner in that sharp, almost scholarly tone were all distracting. People adored Niles despite his nuttiness, awkwardness, and sensitivity issues. What transpired then? How did someone as legendary just disappear? When did David Hyde Pierce first start hiding his identity? Frasier, which ran from 1993 to 2004, became one of the most acclaimed sitcoms in television history throughout its run. Although it was a spin-off of Cheers, it managed to carve out its own niche in the industry rather than relying on the success of its predecessor. The Seattle-based comedy chronicled the adventures of psychiatrist-turned-radio personality Frasier Crane as he dealt with the complexities of Seattle's elite social scene, his own inflated ego, and his troubled family. The entrance of Niles, nevertheless, was the catalyst for the true enchantment. Despite his humble beginnings as a supporting character, David Hyde Pierce's performance propelled him to series centrality. He was more than a supporting player. He stole the show. Pierce looked quite similar to Kelsey Grammer, which helped solidify the choice. It wasn't only the physical match, though, that brought Niles to life. It was the peculiar, charming nervousness that was bubbling away beneath the surface. Actor selections weren't the only thing that went into his facial tics. 2 extended pauses before lines and exaggerated sniffs. The tics were finely tuned, and they gave Niles Crane an authentic air. Like his brother, he worked as a psychiatrist, although he was far more dogmatic about his practice. Tying his shoes was his priority. Crumbs were his enemy. Germs, chaos, spontaneity, and his own feelings were all things he feared. And it was all funny in some way. Even more astounding is the amount of emotional depth Pierce subtly brought to the character. Originally, Niles was a caricature, a neurotic academic whose invisible wife Maris was the object of every ludicrous joke about marriage. Over time, though, he changed. Originally intended as a comedy, his fixation on Frasier's housekeeper Daphne Moon blossomed into a touching and long-running plot point. Pierce played the slow-burn relationship with controlled desire and uncomfortable charm, spanning numerous seasons. You can just sense the buzz when Niles snags the girl. The reason it works is that Pierce never made fun of him. As if urgently attempting to keep it together, he portrayed him as such. People took note. Criticism was also widespread. For as long as Frasier was on, Pierce was a perennial Emmy nominee. With 4 wins under his belt for Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Comedy Series, he was nominated 11 times. That's quite an accomplishment. A lot of famous performers don't win an Emmy for decades, just to give you an idea. Pierce accomplished the almost impossible, pulling off 4. Among the most highly regarded comedies of all time, Frasier amassed an incredible 37 Primetime Emmy Awards over its existence. In spite of this, few are aware that David Hyde Pierce wasn't only a lucky TV actor. A classically trained performer, he was and is. He studied voice, dance, and theatrical construction at Yale University before Frasier ever started. He was more at home on stage than in front of the camera. His schooling greatly influenced his approach to each and every line on Frasier. He has surgical precision in his timing. He moved with the precision of a ballet dancer. This is why, even after all these years, his portrayal is still relevant in a society that has long since forgotten about most sitcoms from the 90s. Pierce brought a level of theatrical expertise to his role as Niles Crane that was unparalleled on Frasier. Niles was spot on, with meticulously orchestrated eye rolls, grimaces, and feints. In contrast to the sarcastic characters, he managed to elevate physical humor to a level of subtle sophistication. Niles Crane is well known even among those who have never seen the program. It's because Pierce gave life to a character who was otherwise just a cartoon, awkward, restrained, and somehow endearing, rather than a shallow parody. He consistently performed as the show progressed, even when given more complex emotional roles. However, Pierce disappeared from the screen just before Frasier was about to finish in 2004. Plus, his reasoning reveals a lot more than everyone anticipated. Fans were anticipating the return of Frasier and Niles Crane, their beloved neurotic siblings, with bated breath when the Frasier reboot premiered in 2023. However, many were taken aback by what they received instead. The 11-season defining actor of Niles Crane, David Hyde Pierce, was noticeably missing. Officially not a cameo. Absolutely not a flashback. Without a single voiceover. This was more than simply unexpected for a program that revolved so heavily around the interplay between Frasier and Niles. At its very heart, it seemed incomplete. The absence of David Hyde Pierce from the new Frasier left millions of fans wondering the same thing. Who has adequately described it, anyway? First things first, this had nothing to do with a missed opportunity or a schedule difficulty. I made this choice on purpose. As Kelsey Grammer attests, Pierce was approached personally regarding a possible part reprise. The point is that David Hyde Pierce wasn't interested, as Grammer put it himself. Absent explanation, everything is calm. After those 2 words, there was complete stillness. However, a deluge of supposition ensued as soon as those 2 words were said. Why would a man who garnered 4 Emmys for his performance in a 90s comedy ever consider leaving the industry? Furthermore, crucially, why is it happening at this particular moment? Let's have a look at the facts. Late in 2023, Paramount Plus revived Frasier, bringing back Kelsey Grammer as the protagonist. Moving the show back to Frasier Crane's old Cheers haunt, Boston, from Seattle, was a big deal. A reunion between Frasier and his adult son Frederick, now a firefighter, was the show's central concept. However, other unique characters' absence was instantly apparent. The names of Daphne, Roz, and Martin were either explicitly stated or casually touched upon. Next, we had Niles, disappearing entirely. There is not a single scene, photograph, or flashback. Rather, a new character named David Crane, who is the son of Niles and Daphne, was presented to the audience. Clearly taking after his father, this Harvard student is socially uncomfortable. Many saw this as an effort to softly bring back the Frasier-Niles relationship without bringing Pierce into it, and the crowd just wouldn't budge. Instantaneous indignation swept the internet, particularly Reddit threads and YouTube comment sections. With Niles absent, this isn't Frasier, as one commenter put it. One commenter compared it to recasting Mozart with someone who owns a piano, when describing the idea of replacing David Hyde Pierce with a counterfeit version of Niles. So, what transpired in the background, if anything? Actually, nobody has really said anything conclusive. However, there are some compelling indicators that suggest a more nuanced situation than plain old apathy. The connection between David Hyde Pierce and his persona must be understood before anything else. Niles had completed his whole character arc by the time Frasier concluded in 2004. He had divorced his poisonous wife Maris, married Daphne, and become a father. And he had often labeled Niles as complete in interviews throughout the years. He had matured emotionally, overcome his neuroses, and discovered joy. Bringing Niles back may have been like tearing something carefully tied for an actor like Pierce, who appreciates structure and finality. People think he avoided them for reasons beyond that, though. Concerning originality, there is another issue. When it comes to taking on new projects, Pierce is notoriously picky. He has been actively involved in the theater, directing musicals, and performing in projects that push his artistic boundaries since Frasier ended. In contrast, the relaunched Frasier was always intended to be more of a throwback than an innovative artistic effort. A lot of people thought the new series was dumb and didn't have the same rhythm or strong ensemble as the old one. Could it be that after reading the preliminary versions, Pierce decided it wasn't worth going back to? Is there another explanation? Core principles. David Hyde Pierce is well known now for his activism and strong convictions, in addition to his acting career. He is outspoken on issues such as LGBTQ+ rights, Alzheimer's research, and the value of purposeful art. Is it possible that his beliefs were at odds with the reboot? A few of viewers hypothesized that he could have had reservations about the trajectory the show was taking Niles, or his kid, on. Pierce reportedly refused to be a part of anything that might diminish the original show's history, according to whispers in the business. Although it hasn't been officially confirmed, it's easy to believe considering how guarded he has been about his work. What was the point of not saying it directly? Why doesn't he just make a public statement or do an interview to justify his decision? It becomes more intimate at this point. One that is quite reclusive is David Hyde Pierce. He stayed out of the tabloids and kept quiet about his personal life, even when Frasier was at the top of his game. In 2007, he made a low-key and serious public announcement about his identity. He didn't get married on a magazine cover. He doesn't want attention and prefers to live a low-key life. Then, it seems sense to just disappear without a trace. Bringing up David, Niles' son, was seen as a middle-ground solution. Without Pierce's return, the authors aimed for a return to the previous dynamic. Nevertheless, it was all in vain. Fans saw right through the gadget, even if the young actor portraying David was skilled. You can't use a stand-in for the chemistry that made Frasier and Niles what they were. Niles had more than just Frasier blood in him. In several situations, he served as a guide for right action. A lot of people were unconvinced by the reboot's attempt to rein in that lightning. Power adds even more nuanced element. One thing that actors frequently give up is control, but David Hyde Pierce regained it by simply saying no. Defying industry norms, he charted his own course. He never agreed to work for compensation. Reminiscence and the demands of his fans didn't sway him. He may have communicated more by his decision to remain faceless than with any amount of words said. After Frasier, where exactly did David Hyde Pierce go to? Neither a mysterious abduction nor a clandestine controversy provide the solution. Actually, the actual narrative is nearly reversed. Pierce subtly made his way back to the stage, where he truly thrives, even if millions of people were expecting him to remain on television. Plus, he did more than simply return to his origins. He gave himself over to the world of live theater, casting roles, directing shows, and working with Broadway's most illustrious figures. He may have never wanted to be on television, which might explain why he has decided not to appear on any further shows. Could it be that achieving stardom was never the objective? Is it possible that cutting ties was actually a relief rather than a loss? Pierce was a theater kid before he was famous for sitcoms and Emmys. While attending Yale University, he was a part of one of the nation's most exclusive drama departments. Among his contemporaries were Tony Shalhoub and Patricia Clarkson, both of whom would go on to perform in both film and theater. Even though he became famous on television, he found true purpose in the theater. There is no editing, no retakes, and the audience and performer are inseparable in this unique performing style. You take charge of your time, energy, and decisions as you immerse yourself in the character and perform it night after night. Pierce, whose work is characterized by an obsession with physical detail, considered the theater to be more than simply a profession. It was his sanctuary. Pierce made a triumphant comeback to Broadway in the musical comedy Monty Python's Spamalot, portraying the role of Sir Robin just 1 year following the cancellation of Frasier in 2004. His singing voice, comic dexterity, and stage presence astounded audiences who had previously only known him as neurotic Niles. Not only that, but it was the initial indication that Pierce was opting for something totally new, rather than pursuing acting parts or another series. After that, in the murder mystery musical Curtains, which came out in 2006, Pierce portrayed the role of Lieutenant Frank Cioffi, a detective who had a hidden passion for musical theater. Funny, clumsy, emotional, and musically demanding, it was perfect for him. He was named Best Actor in a Musical at the Tony Awards for his performance. He had managed to reassert himself as a prominent theater performer without succumbing to the gimmicks of television stardom. Once again, he had to work for it. And it wasn't all. Pierce managed to juggle acting and directing for the following 10 years. The Broadway musical It Should Have Been You, written by his spouse, Brian Hargrove, was his first directing effort. Despite the show's mixed reviews upon its debut in 2015, it revealed a different side of Pierce, a humble individual who isn't afraid to put others before themselves. On the same interview, he highlighted how directing allowed him more creative freedom than he had on television, where he felt scripts were locked and changes were taken away from him. The Broadway production of Hello, Dolly, with Bette Midler, included him in the lead role in 2017, when he portrays Horace Vandergelder. Critics lauded their relationship and pointed out that Pierce gave emotional depth and moderation to a part that could have been overblown. Once again, the craft, the silent labor, was what really shone out. Now we are in the modern era. Directing Stephen Sondheim's last musical, Here We Are in 22, was one of the most personally taxing experiences of Pierce's career. This was Sondheim's first posthumous composition, and it premiered off-Broadway in 23. A motley crew of stage veterans were guided by Pierce through an offbeat experimental story about mortality, fate, and the unknown. The writing received varied reviews, but almost everyone could agree that Pierce's directing was insightful, kind, and respectful. He saw this as more than simply a job, an homage to a man whose contributions molded contemporary theater was the intended outcome. The next year, in 25, Pierce made a triumphant comeback on Broadway with Pirates, an audacious adaptation of the beloved operetta by Gilbert and Sullivan. The Pirates of Penzance is now a musical. Unexpectedly popular, the play included a jazz and Caribbean music set against a fantastical backdrop inspired by New Orleans. Two characters that Pierce portrayed were Major General Stanley and W.S. Gilbert, skiplessly navigating between them. Why is this important, though, when critics hailed his performance as a masterclass in timing and aptly labeled him as a national treasure hiding in plain sight? For the simple reason that it demonstrates that David Hyde Pierce wasn't invisible. Rather, he just found a new environment that allowed him to operate without limitations. But there are other factors to consider than Pierce's professional decisions if you wish to know why he departed Hollywood. The choices he made on a personal level are what really define his life. People were always curious in Pierce's private life, while Frasier was at its peak. Romance was never on the table. On the subject of romantic partnerships, he evaded questions. His was the subject of continuous speculation in tabloids, particularly because he portrayed a character whose flamboyance and mannerisms led many to believe he was gay. At the end of the conversation, Pierce remained silent. It wasn't that he felt embarrassed. Rather, he prioritized his solitude over feeling compelled to explain himself. After that, Pierce discreetly came out as in 2007, 3 years after Frasier ended. He came clean about his relationship status with Brian Hargrove, a TV writer and producer. Additionally, in same year, same-sex marriage was briefly authorized in California. Although Pierce and Hargrove were legally married, their union was rendered null and void when Proposition 8 was approved a few months later. It was an agonizing time. Something intimate and happy had been deleted from public view. Pierce has discussed the impact the event had on his perspective on public life in subsequent interviews. Protecting what's important becomes second nature. When you grow up hearing that your closest relationships don't count. If someone doesn't deserve an explanation, you shouldn't give them one. When your performance isn't genuine, you stop trying to fool others. Prioritizing peace over popularity is what you learn. He was an outspoken supporter of LGBTQ+ rights and more. Inspired by his grandfather's battle with Alzheimer's, Pierce has also been a vocal supporter of Alzheimer's research. For decades, he has worked closely with the Alzheimer's Association, lobbied Congress, and participated in national awareness initiatives. His initiatives have been constant and personal, unlike many celebrity promotions. Rather than the other way around, he exploits his prominence to further his advocacy. Pierce has stated in interviews that the theater has always welcomed him unconditionally, regardless of his role or personal qualities. Without limiting himself to the realm of acting, he characterized Hollywood as performative in its treatment of individual identities. In contrast, he was able to exist in the theater without having to justify his existence. That difference is significant. Pierce has constructed a life that goes in the opposite way from that of many superstars who want to be relevant. Calmness, profundity, and significance were his choices. People truly want to know why David Hyde Pierce declined stardom when they wonder why he isn't publicly visible anymore. Neither scandal nor resentment are the answers. It's genuine. On stage, in activism, and in love, he discovered places he could let his guard down and truly be himself. Plus, why return once you've experienced that? The unsettling, taboo, and unspoken portion of the narrative is here. Suppose David Hyde Pierce stayed put instead of voluntarily stepping down. What if his star began to fade away in Hollywood? What if, behind closed doors, the very business that had lavished him with 4 Emmys, widespread praise, and critical admiration suddenly stopped hiring him? It's easy to fantasize about a puritanical or creatively fulfilling artist going back to the stage. The more difficult issue to tackle is whether or not contemporary media still has a place for actors like David Hyde Pierce. Why not, though? The fact is that Pierce had a rocky transition into a slate of premium films and new network projects when Frasier closed in 2004. Around him, there were no featured automobiles. His acting resume was devoid of high-budget romantic comedies, legal thrillers, and ensemble dramas. It's only natural to assume that Hollywood would bow to the will of a four-time Emmy winner with a worldwide audience. The offers, on the other hand, either stopped coming or were ones he was unwilling to accept. The entertainment industry is rife with typecasting. When you establish a strong connection with one position, people in the business tend to view you solely from that perspective. The part of Niles Crane was so defined and stylized for Pierce that it nearly overshadowed his other acting abilities. Because of how convincingly he portrayed the role, anxious, effete, neurotic, and intellectual, casting directors had a hard time picturing him in any other role. He didn't play the role of the gloomy investigator, the untamed hero, or even the distant anti-hero. He was the Niles type, which puts him in a very tight spot. There is solid evidence supporting this tendency, thus it is not just conjecture. Hollywood studios are reluctant to engage in a form of reinvention that would allow an actor to break out of a typecast character unless doing so would ensure a certain return. Pierce has a sophisticated mix of skills, including physical humor, subtle restraint, and caustic wit. It isn't exactly a box office bomb. Actors like him are frequently neglected in this day of action-packed storylines, reboots, and tentpole blockbusters. But there's more to this than meets the eye. Your identity. In the year 2007, David Hyde Pierce made his public debut. 3 years had passed after Frasier's finale, and the entertainment world still hadn't started openly discussing LGBTQ+ equality and representation. Openly homosexual people faced danger during that period, particularly male actors who had previously played straight roles. Unspoken regulations existed. You can be homosexual secretly or be placed in extremely limited, flat parts if you identify as gay. But being homosexual in public and demanding same pay, benefits, and opportunities as heterosexual people? Quite unusual. Something is off with this. Consider other performers who have been through this, successful, out homosexual guys who find themselves offered less complex parts or none at all. Not every time is it an intentional omission. It can be structural at times. Those characters don't exist in writers' imaginations. Those tales aren't approved by producers. The casting agents aren't the ones who decide. It turns into a gradual fade into oblivion. Look at Pierce's Frasier co-star, Kelsey Grammer, and see how that stacks up. After Frasier, Grammer's career took a sharp turn. He stays in the spotlight, keeps making headlines, and, most crucially, is back as the undisputed lead in the Frasier remake, which is his defining role. His acting career has taken him across the theater, animation, and conservative media. A number of high-profile personal scandals have also befallen him. His career, however, was never in a slump like Pierce's. What gives? One possible explanation is the Hollywood attitude toward leading men as they become older. Some guys, especially those who are powerful, serious, or humorously dominant, have their aging process recast as distinguished. For others, notably homosexual men or those who don't conform to Hollywood's binary of male attractiveness, it's more of a gradual decline. Pierce lacks that bad boy charisma. His appearance isn't that of an action hero. His strengths lie in his wit, vulnerability, and intellect. Those characteristics, however, are seldom the focus of current popular stories. Not without the addition of anything else, like a franchise, some youthful energy, or a marketable scandal. certain roles are constructed in a way that is structurally imbalanced as well. Extroverted, assertive, and reactive characters, those who make bold moves and pronounce opinions, tend to be the ones given the most screen time in scripts. Pierce possesses a deft touch as an actor. He expresses hesitancy, uncertainty, and complex emotions. These characteristics really shine in plays or in complex, long-form television dramas. The mainstream, however, is moving away from such positions. Sometimes they go to more well-known people who have been in the spotlight recently. The thoughtful intellectual character, which Pierce nailed 20 years ago, is now relegated to the role of supporting stereotype or comedic relief, even in ensemble series. Is it possible that his departure from Hollywood was due to burnout? Most likely. Television is a physically demanding profession. The hours are grueling, the performer's creative involvement is negligible at best, and the advertising cycles are endless. Pierce, who prioritizes honesty and solitude, may have grown weary of the pressures of perpetual public scrutiny. I can totally see him stepping back after years of giving his all to one character, if only because he was sick of following other people's rules. Burnout aside, there's also the matter of personal preference. Pierce may have felt that the available projects were lacking depth, were too repetitious, or demeaning to the creative process when he examined the screenplays, characters, and creative directions. It is easy to understand why a man of his kind would reject down part after job that didn't live up to his expectations. At this point, it's impossible to sidestep the cultural critique. On paper, Hollywood is all about diversity and inclusion. Yet, it subtly excludes those who don't fit its commercial standards. Hollywood does not consider a homosexual guy in his 60s who excels in subtle, well-spoken roles to be bankable. The term bankable is more relevant to contemporary casting decisions than most people think. Ability is irrelevant. Both the potential for loss and the potential gain are at play here. David Hyde Pierce may have been considered a danger despite his many talents. Then, was he forced to leave? I don't mean scandalously. A blacklist did not exist. Stay out of it. Nothing to report. A diminishing number of jobs that may have challenged or inspired someone like him, along with a steady stream of closed doors and unreturned calls. Hollywood neither booed nor invited him back onto the platform. After leaving television, David Hyde Pierce has participated in a number of initiatives, some of which are illuminating. Over the past 20 years, he has maintained his reputation as a trailblazer in animation, cult comedy, and well-selected serious works. Still, he's working, but now he chooses how and when he works. In A Bug's Life, Pixar's 1989 adventure about a group of misfit bugs who come together to save their colony, Pierce voiced the character Slim, an overly controlling stick insect during his time as Frasier. He was like Niles Crane, but with an insect form. His deadpan delivery and neurotic charisma made the character distinctive. Dr. Doppler, an astronomer who is half dog and half man, navigates space and uncomfortable parenting in Treasure Planet, 2002, where he brings gravity and humanity. On top of that, he and Chris Rock were the voice actors behind the animated body Double Drix in Osmosis Jones. Though distinct from one another, these performances all relied on Pierce's strong suit, giving personality and insight to characters who may otherwise be one-dimensional. In Fallout, New Vegas, he voiced the upbeat yet disturbing AI Autodoc, making an unexpected presence in the gaming world as well. Despite its diminutive size, the character continues to generate buzz among series enthusiasts. Even when he's not doing live action, Pierce can still captivate an audience with a single remark that may go from reassuring to frightening. And he's not entirely missing from television and movies. even if he hasn't done many big screen parts recently. Pierce returned, kind of, to his part from the 2001 film in the 2015 Netflix prequel Wet, Hot American Summer, First Day of Camp, which is based on the cult classic. Professor Henry Newman, who played him, could only make cameo appearances over Skype, a playful reference to his busy schedule. It served as a quick but amusing reminder that his comic instincts remain as keen when he's not in the spotlight. His most recent role was as the lead in the historical drama Julia 2002-2022 on HBO Max, which was on the life of the famous chef Julia Child. Paul Child was Julia's spouse and a fellow artist, and Pierce played him. His admirers have always admired his grounded intelligence, and this character was subtle and mature enough to let him explore themes of closeness, support, and quiet strength. In the 2004 horror flick The Exorcism, which starred Russell Crowe, Pierce showed that he could still shock viewers by switching genres. His selectiveness is a kind of protest, more than just choice, a subtle defiance of meaningless compromises. Much obliged for your time. Embrace the power of likes, comments, and subscriptions to show your enjoyment. For more thrilling entertainment, click on the next video.